Greetings and welcome to this video, everybody. Today I wanted to share and talk about some of the books which have helped me become a better developer. One series I can recommend in general is the Head First series by O'Reilly, and one book from this series is the Head First Java book. I think that this book is a pretty good read for people who want to start with programming in general, but also who want to kind of explore Java as a programming language, because they also tackle things like the life cycle of objects, what an object is, how you can get from class to object, and things like that. So it's a pretty good read, it's pretty understandable, and the Head First series as a whole utilizes a lot of pictures. They have pretty easy language, it's very accessible. So I think it's not only a very understandable read if you want to start out in the field of programming and development, but it's also a pretty entertaining read because there are some insider jokes and things like this here and there. So it's entertaining, it's pretty accessible, it's fun, and it's very informative. So I can really recommend this book. Now, granted, the book is a little older. It was first published in 2005, and it also tackled Java 5. So we are now up to Java 11. So there are some versions in between, but the basics remain the same. So if you just want to kind of start to learn how Java works internally and some of the core concepts of how objects are created and the life cycle of objects, I would still recommend this book, even if it's a little dated by today's standards. Now, the next book is the Design Patterns book, also by the Head First series. And as you can see from the picture of the book, or rather from the title of the book, it says updated for Java 8, so you know that it's also not the most recently released book, but it tackles in pretty entertaining fashion different patterns and how you can recognize patterns. It tackles what patterns are for. It goes into detail of some patterns like the command pattern, observer pattern, factory pattern, and things like this. And it also then talks about how important it is not to just enforce patterns everywhere, but that it's important if you recognize a pattern somewhere, that it's also pretty important to utilize the pattern correctly, which makes the code more understandable and maintainable, because other developers will then also recognize this pattern and then basically have an easier understanding of what you were trying to do with this code. So this is a book which I can recommend if you want to learn more about patterns, and then also you will be able to utilize patterns more in your daily work, which is a pretty good thing because, as I already said, I think it makes the code very much more maintainable. Now, the next book, and big surprise, is also from the Head First series, and this one is called Software Development. So everybody's agile today, and nobody really thinks about why we're being agile or why we want to be agile and have created agile development processes. And this book, I think, really does a great job of explaining from the start what the problem is we are facing with getting requirements right from the customer. So it has a pretty entertaining story in the beginning that the customer wants to have a website from you. You develop this website, and when the customer then first sees this website, it's not really matching the expectations the customer had. So it then describes how you can use iterations in order to kind of get more feedback from the customer, how important it is to have pretty short feedback loops, and then goes on and continues through how you should build your code, how you can utilize iterations, how you can utilize test-driven development, and things like that. So it's a pretty good read if you want to kind of get a better grasp of where the problems with customer interactions and how to build software which meets the customer's expectations comes from, and how you can deal with those problems, which is something every software developer should be able to do, in my opinion, because the most important thing about our work isn't to write code, but it's to solve the problems of our customers. So we need to put the customer first and then put our code second. So the next book I want to talk about is actually more for the German-speaking people watching this video, and it's called Weniger schlecht programmieren. It's also the only book I've talked about today which I have in physical form, just because I have all the other books available as ebooks since they were in the Humble bundle just recently. And I've also subscribe to the Safari books online from O'Reilly, and I'm reading the books there. And this book is actually something you should read as a German developer, I think, because it talks about almost everything which you can do in order to become a better programmer. The title, translated into English, basically means how to code less badly. And it talks about basically everything which you can do, how you can name your variables right, how you can utilize tests, how you can deal with mistakes or things like finger pointing. So it basically does a round trip with everything where you can improve yourself and how you can basically be a better coder, and all kinds of different bits and things where you can improve. So with function names, how you can separate code, how you can write maintainable code better. And it's basically a read which I can recommend for every German programmer out there. And if you don't happen to be fluent in German, there are always we can almost call them classics at this point, like Clean Code and Clean Coder by Bob Martin, which I haven't read myself, to be honest, but colleagues and co-workers which have read those books think that they are pretty well books, how you can write better code. I mean, Bob Martin is one of the probably founders of test-driven development and is very enthusiastic about it. You can also search YouTube or other online video platforms in order to find talks by Bob Martin about test-driven development, where he talks about the basics. And the books, of course, go in a little deeper. So if you want to learn more about the style of coding and test-driven development, I think you can have a look at those two books by Bob Martin. Now, one final book I could recommend is The Pragmatic Programmer by Dave Thomas and Andrew Hunt, which also does a pretty good job of describing how you can write well-written code, and kind of has a different approach to things as Bob Martin, I think. So Dave Thomas is pretty much about being pragmatic, which also shows in his book. And if you want to at least kind of get to know some stuff about him, what he thinks, you can have a look at his YouTube talk, or rather a talk at a conference, which is available on YouTube, where basically his topic was Agile is Dead, which I found pretty entertaining and also very much on the nose, because he talks about how Agile has transformed from this idea himself and a few others had in the beginning, and now it has kind of transformed to this management thing where it's all about getting certificates and stuff like that, and we want to be Agile just so that we can be Agile and kind of have it on our names because it's cool. And it's a pretty good talk. You should have a look at this talk at least, and if you want, you can also have a look at this book, because it was also recommended to me by some of my former co-workers, so I think that you can't go false there. Now, this isn't so much as a recommendation for a book, but more for a publisher, because I think that they are pretty fast when it comes to having books about newer technologies and newer frameworks, and this publisher would be packed. So if you want to have a look for books or video tutorials on newer technologies, which are now pretty hip and are pretty new, you can always have a look there, because they are pretty fast with getting out books for new technologies and frameworks. And they also very often have special bundles for $25 or so, or have $10 book sales and things like that. So I think you can get pretty good deals there to have a first look at some technology or some framework like Vue.js or React and things like that. So if you want to read up on any new technology and kind of want to get a overview over this technology or framework, you can have a look there. So that's it for today's video. I hope that you found it entertaining and that you could also use some of the recommendations I provided. If you did, please be so kind as to leave a comment down below and saying which of the books you enjoyed and why you did so. And also, keep on coding.